jump back just one second. When we were praying and we were talking about how God is concerned about every portion of our lives, and an old story of my life popped back up, and I'll just throw that in as an illustration to the prayer. A number of years ago, well, quite a number of years ago, Mom's been gone for 12 years now, so way more than 12 years ago, my mom finally gave in and went fishing one day with my dad. Mom really didn't care about being in the boat. She hated water. She grew up when they, were afraid to take baths because you'd get polio. So Mom hated, I don't think Mom ever put more than an inch or two of water in the tub when she took a bath. She never learned how to swim. If she ever went to the ocean, she was going to wade, she'd put about one toe in, that's good enough for her. Mom just didn't care about water. So she didn't care about fishing either. And Dad loved to fish. And they had a little boat. They were empty nesters, and Dad finally convinced Mom to go fishing with him one day. So as was my mother's habit, she took a book, something about the Lord. I don't know what it would have been, but it would have been about the Lord. She took a book with her thinking, well, I'll just sit and read and he can fish. And she finally said, well, if I'm out here, I guess I might as well fish. And so she cast a line in the water, and she sat there and didn't catch anything. And getting rather frustrated, Mom finally said, okay, God, I'm being a submissive wife. I really don't want to be here, but I'm here anyway. It seems like you can at least let me catch a stupid fish. Oh, Lord, I'm sorry. There are so many more important things in the world than that. Why would I help you? You don't care whether or not I catch a fish. And immediately her cork went under her cold tongue. And from that moment on, Dad couldn't even hardly keep his line in the water from all the fish that Mama caught. God cares about everything in your life, even whether or not you're catching a fish. And it wasn't important to God that my mom caught a fish. It was important to God that she understood that it mattered. And understand that every portion of your life matters. You may not always see it. You might even think, well, I didn't get blessed because I didn't catch a fish. Number one, that's not what blessing means. And number two, God cares. You may not catch a fish, but He cares. He's concerned, and He knows. So, you'll notice that the sermon is titled Wet Feet this morning. I got to tell you, even last night at 10 or 10:30 when I took the dogs outside in the backyard and I saw the lightning, I didn't think we were really going to get in the rain or if we did, it just be sprinkling. So it was without prophecy and foreknowledge that I chose to preach this sermon this morning. I just didn't know. So we'll just attribute that to God, and we'll pray that He's in it as we go forward. I want to ask you to take your Bibles this morning. There's not a PowerPoint. You're in the old-fashioned way. You have to listen. And if you didn't bring your Bibles, look on with somebody who did. How's that? Go to Joshua chapter 3, please. Joshua chapter 3. We'll begin with verse 11 and read through verse 16. Joshua 3, 11 through 16. Now, while you're turning there, I want to give you just a little bit of background as to where we are in the historical scope of things within the Old Testament. By the time we get to Joshua 3, Moses has just died. Moses has just been, God has just raised up Joshua to now lead the Israelites, raised him up as the leader. And so as we join this story, the nation, and remember that when we talk about nations in the Bible, we're not talking about countries or governmental or legal boundaries. We're talking about people groups. And so anytime that you're reading your word where it says, like, nation will rise up against nation, it's not talking about governments per se. It's talking about peoples. The nation of Israel is camped, and they're camped on the banks of the Jordan River. The Jordan River at that time of year, as best we can pinpoint this, would have been swollen with the spring rains. And so it was at or nearly at flood stage, scary time to think about that river or trying to cross it. And so the nation of Israel is on one side of the river, and they're looking over, and right on the other side of the river is the land that God has promised. It was the land the very first Sunday that was here. We talked about 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad, and 2 were good. Everybody remember that song? I won't make you do But when we did that, we talked about how they'd already gone over and they had supervised that land 40 years before, and they said, wow, this is a pretty great place. Now they're back there, they're getting ready to take that land as God has promised to them, a land that was flowing with milk and honey. They're cut off from those promises by this flooded chasm that has no bridge, it has no ferry, it has no way to cross it. And it's at this point, as we read, that God provides the means by which they shall cross. And so with that, let's look at Joshua 3:11 through 16. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So, when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage during all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, the Salt Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. You know, I'm sure like me, you've heard a lot of sermons based on this text, and a lot of sermons that come from this passage. And yet as I read here, and then a lot of these sermons were based on faith and what it took in the perspective of faith for these folks to step into the water. And yet as I read here today, it seems to me to have less to do with my faith and more to do with my obedience. You see, God requires us to step out in obedience and, as the saying goes, sometimes get our feet wet. Today we're going to look not only at the results of Joshua's obedience, but at obedience to God. And we'll talk a little bit about the results of disobedience to God, and then perhaps finally the focus of our obedience. Like most small boys, I was kind of drawn to the water. I understood things that most little boys, given the freedom to do so, understand. I understood that mud puddles were made for splashing in. And often in my child's mind, in my youth, those mud puddles became entire oceans if they were very big, and nearly anything that could float became part of a naval armada. Little twigs would be battleships, and a little bigger might be an aircraft carrier, and all those things, all ready for high battle on the seas. Rocks and gravel suddenly became depth charges and cannonballs fired at those twigs and sticks, and all the mud puddles were. I loved it. And I was really what I would have called blessed, or what I would call today, I would say that I was fortunate. Because I had, at the house where I spent many of my young years, I had an alley behind the house, and behind that house, alongside the alley on either